Mary had her own ideas about love. Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, was 18, tall, handsome, and a fine lute player. Mary described him as the lustiest and best proportioned long lad she had ever seen. When he fell ill, she nursed him. They fell in love. It was a whirlwind romance. And 4 months later, in the Chapel Royal at Holyrood Palace in Edinburgh, they were married. The effect on Elizabeth was dramatic. Within a few days, it was reported that she and Robert had become inseparable again. If the young Queen of Scots could marry for love, why couldn't England's Queen do the same? But the return of the rumour of marriage brought new and fierce resistance. The Duke of Norfolk, the most powerful noble in the land, was the Queen's closest male relative and was bitterly opposed to the prospective match. Norfolk had always resented the rise to power of the upstart Dudley, a resentment intensified by his own failure to gain high office. He became the focus of the anti-Dudley camp. Their rivalry split the court. Dudley's side took to wearing purple ribbons, Norfolk's yellow. The two factions roamed the corridors of power, armed and angry. The Queen intervened to slap both sides down. When Dudley objected to the Queen's flirtation with a young, pretty courtier, she lashed him with her tongue, loud enough for the whole court to hear.
I will have here but one mistress and no master.
Norfolk, too, found himself in disgrace. At a Privy Council meeting, he raised the matter of the Queen's marriage and the succession. She flew into a rage, calling him a traitor and adding that she would not name a successor as she had no wish to be buried alive. For good measure, she also threatened to have the Duke arrested. But her tough words could not resolve the tensions at court. Behind the bickering lay the real problem, the succession. Until Elizabeth married and produced an heir, the crisis would never go away. While Elizabeth fought to hold the men of her court together, Mary enjoyed a female triumph. On the 19th of June, 1566, in a tiny room in the castle at Edinburgh, Mary fulfilled her duty as a woman and as a queen. She had a child. Her labour was long and hard, but the baby was healthy, and it was a boy. They christened him James. Scotland now had an heir, and Mary, Queen of Scots, a son. When the English ambassador saw the baby a few days later, he reported that he was likely to prove a goodly prince. The news was far from goodly for Elizabeth.
She burst out to some of her ladies that the Queen of Scots was mother of a fair son, while she was but a barren stock.
But Mary's triumph did not last. The initial euphoria of marriage had faded as Darnley's true nature emerged. He was violent, an arrogant drunk, a lout with all the makings of a psychopath. Darnley had become insanely jealous of David Rizzio, Mary's Italian secretary, whom he suspected of having an affair with the Queen. A group of Protestant Scottish lords also hated Rizzio because he was a Catholic and the Queen's favourite. So the two groups of Rizzio's enemies came together and signed a contract to murder him. On the night of the 9th of March 1566, the conspirators burst in here into the Queen's smallest chamber, where they found Rizzio having one of his late-night tête-à-tête with the Queen. He was dragged outside and stabbed 57 times. The conspirators thoughtfully left Darnley's dagger sticking in Rizzio's belly. Less than a year later, Darnley himself was dead. The house where he was staying was blown up, and Darnley was found strangled in the orchard. Everything suggested that the man responsible for the crime was James Hepburn, Earl of Bothwell, who was one of Mary's leading supporters. Still worse, the finger of suspicion also pointed at Mary herself. And, as Elizabeth told her bluntly, her behaviour was making a bad situation worse.
Madam, my ears have been so astounded and my heart so frightened to hear of the horrible and abominable murder of your former husband, our mutual cousin, that I have scarcely spirit to write. Yet I cannot conceal that I grieve more for you than for him.
But there was still worse to come. Mary was abducted, taken by force to Dunbar, and raped. The perpetrator was James Hepburn, the Earl of Bothwell. 2 weeks later, they were married.
Madam, how could a worse choice be made for your honour than in such haste to marry a subject who, besides other notorious lacks, public fame has charged with the murder of your late husband?
Within a few weeks, Mary paid a terrible price for her folly. A large party of the Scottish nobility rose up in arms against their scandalous queen. The two sides joined in battle, but Mary's troops melted away without striking a blow. Even her husband, Bothwell, negotiated a safe conduct for himself from the field of battle. Mary was defeated and abandoned. Mary was brought as a prisoner here to the island fortress of Lochleven, where she miscarried of twins. Then, broken in body and mind, under the immediate threat of physical force, she was compelled to abdicate in favour of her 1-year-old son, James. She was never to see him again. Mary had married unwisely, for love and for lust, and as a consequence, she had lost her crown, her son, and her liberty. Perhaps, after all, there was wisdom in living and ruling alone.